So, let's start. The topic of this week's Sicha is going to be the whole idea of why did God create poor people? Why are there poor people in the world? Isn't it better to run the world even according to God's system, like communistic rule? Everybody should get a little bit. Everybody should be poor, like it says. So let's look at the source from this week's Parsha. It says like this. Ki yeh becha evyon me'echad achecha, if there's going to be a poor person from one of your brothers, be'echad she'arecha, in one of your gates, be'artzecha, in the land, asher Hashem Elokecha noten lach, in the land that God, your God, is giving to you. Lo te'ametz levavcha, you should not harden your heart, ve'lo tikpotz et yadcha, and you should not keep your hand tight, me'achicha evyon, from your brother who is poor. Ki patoach tiftach et yadcha, you should open your hand, lo, to him, ve'ha'avet ta'avitenu da yemachsero asher yechsar lo. And you should take care of him. How much should you take care of him? We're not going to go very deep into that part, but you should take care of him whatever he is lacking. So if he's lacking, if he comes from a rich family, he should get more than someone who's coming from a poor family because he's lacking more. Okay. Then it continues. Hishamer lecha peniyeh dvarim levavcha blial. You should be very careful. Maybe your heart is going to have some evil in it. Lemor, to say, Karva shnat hasheva shnat hashmita. The seventh year has come, and what happens in the seventh year? In the seventh year, all the loans are forgiven. And somebody asks you for a loan before the seventh year, you'd be afraid to give it to him, because next year the loan is going to be forgiven. V'ra'a einecha be'achicha. Your eye is going to be bad in your brothers, ha'evyon, the poor one. Ve'lo titen lo, and you're not going to give to him. You know what's going to happen? Ve'kara alecha el Hashem. He's going to complain to you, to God. V'aya bechachet, and you're going to have sin. Naton titen lo, but no, you should surely give to him. Ve'lo yera levavcha, your heart should not be bad about him. Betitcha lo, when you give his money. Ki biglal hadavar hazeh, he says, don't worry, because you are acting in such a manner. Yevarechecha Hashem Elokecha bechol maasecha. God is going to bless you in all that you do. Ubechol mishlach yadecha. In whatever you're going to touch, God is going to bless. And then here is the problem. Here is what we're going to try to understand. God is God. God is fair. God is righteous. God is nice. And this is what we're going to need to understand to the depth in this week's Sicha. Pay attention what God says. It looks like God is a big capitalist. He's not a communist. And he's not understood why. And God, it's almost like a promise. God says, Ki lo yechdal evyon mikerev haaretz. God says there's never going to be a time where there's not going to be a poor person amongst the land. Al ken anochi metzavcha le'emor, therefore I command you, patoach tiftach et yadcha le'achicha, you should surely open your hand to your brother, le'aniecha, to the poor people, le'evyoncha, to the real poor people, be'artzecha, to your destitute, in your land.
So it's a minimum guaranteed by Hashem.
Yeah, it looks like God is saying there's going to be poor people, no matter what.
Because they need shelter, and they shouldn't starve to death.
Let's see what's going to happen.
Right.
Very good. Okay, so let's try to understand what is God's idea over here. So let's read the story. Le'admor Maharash ba pam Yehudi. To the Admor Maharash, there once came a Jew. Miyad lachar chatunato, immediately after his wedding. Sha'aya mud'ag biyoter benogia lapanasato. He was very worried how he's going to make a living. Holicho Admor Maharash el hachalon. The Admor Maharash took him to the window. והראה לו על הלבנה, he showed him the moon. כנראה היה זה בלילה או לפנות ערב, it looks like it was at night or in the evening, בזמן שראו את הלבנה, at the time they saw the moon. ואמר לו, and this is what he said to him, אתה רואה, says, look, הרי שהסיהרה מקבלת משמשה. It says, the moon receives from the sun. It says, you know how I created this universe? Not everybody is a giver. There's some people who are giving, some people who are takers. Look at the sun. The sun gives light. The moon takes light. And then it shines. The moon doesn't give light. It takes the light from the sun and then it shines it on further on. It doesn't have its own light. It says, that's the way I created the universe. There's givers and there's takers. God says to him.
But the moon gives.
Okay, but it gives from what? From the sun.
Yes.
It's just like a poor person, even if he gets charity, he's also required to give charity from the charity that he gives. But it's not his,
Right.
it's the sun's. Okay?
That's it, yeah.
וכמו כן, and then it gives him a Kabbalistic idea. We're just going to learn the Kabbalah first, but then we want to understand what does it mean, because Kabbalah is not understood. It says, this is what it means, Malchus mekabelet mizo. This is, says, the attribute of kingship receives from the attribute of zo, of chesed, gvura, tiferet, netzach, hod, yesod. וכן למעלה מעלה, בסיום, it says, this is how it looks up in heaven. Very strange story. עד לזקנותך, and it says, don't worry, until you get to the old age, לא יחסר לך פרנסה, you're going to be rich. Or in other words, you're going to be rich, don't worry about it. That's what the conversation between the Rebbe Maharash and the Chassid. ומובן, שאכן התקיים הדבר בפועל, and this is exactly what happened. שעד לזקנותו היה עשיר, he was a rich person. It says, what was so strange on the fact that he was a rich person? So I'll tell you what was so strange. Rabbis throughout the ages were not rich. Rabbis were always poor. Rabbis are the poor of the society. You know, instead of running after money all day long, they're doing business all day long, they're thinking about other matters. So with him though, there was a miracle. Even though he was a rabbi, what kind of a rabbi was he? He was a rich rabbi. I don't know what he did with his money. Maybe he invested it in Tesla when Tesla was down and he became rich from it. I don't know exactly how he got his money, but whatever means he got his money, that's how he got his money. אף ששימש ברבנות. It says until he was, even though he was a rabbi. דווקא לעת זקנתו נהפך עליו הגלגל. When he became an old man, it says he lost his money. But by that time, you know, you don't care. You're an old man, you're 85, you married all your children off, everybody's taken care of. Okay, so I'm not gonna be a rich guy. What's the big deal? So let's go to us. ובנוגע לענייננו, when it comes to us, כשרואים למטה משפיע מקבל. So it says, so let's try to understand. Rebbe Maharash told this person, this is the world God created. There's always a giver, there's always the rich man and a poor man. That's the way I created it. That's the way I want it. I want there to be rich and poor. I don't want communism, God says. I want capitalism. Not exactly, but that's the idea. I want some people to be rich and I want some people to be poor. That's the way I created the world. Don't try to tell me everybody should be equal. I don't want everybody to be equal. Okay? הנה הסיבה לכך, it says, the reason why I want rich and poor, בגלל שיש דוגמה זה למעלה בשמיים, it says, because this is the way I created the heavens. There's the sun and there's the moon. The sun is rich with light. The poor is poor with light. But don't worry, the sun gives the poor moon, it gives it its light, and now the moon also has light. Don't worry, that's the way I wanted to create it. הירח והשמש, the moon and the sun. שהלבנה מקבלת מאור השמש, the moon receives the light of the sun. והטעם, and the reason, שכן הוא בלבנה ושמש, and just the way I created the sun and the moon, this is how I created the world. בגלל שכן הוא במלכות וזו. It says this is all starts in Kabbalah because Malchut, the kingship, receives from Zo. And that's what we're going to need to understand. So let's look at source number 2 in the Psalms. In the Psalms, there's a verse that says, Yeshev olam lifnei Elokim, Chesed ve'emet manin tzarehu. May he sit before God forever and point kindness and truth to protect him. Okay, so what does it mean? Muva b'midrash. It looks like, who was the first bleeding heart liberal? So you would think, it started in Russia. It didn't. You know where it started? Amar David lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. King David came in front of God and he had the same complaint that the communists have. He had exactly the communist ideal to God. He says, it's not fair, the way you're running the world. It says, Ribon HaOlam, it says, God of the universe. How come you created Elon Musk? He's got, I don't know how many billions and billions of dollars. He doesn't know what to do with his money. He's trying to he burns it every day in rockets to Mars. That's what he does with it. And then right next to him, on the same street, there are guys dying, they don't have enough food. How does it work? I don't understand this. This is what King David is telling God. He's complaining to God. He says, why did you make it such a world? Couldn't you be nice? Give everybody the same? We are on page 5 at the top. Yeshev olam lifnei Elokim. It says, Teyasher olamcha b'shaveh. It says you should give everybody the same. Ashirim v'aniyim. It says, take the money and distribute it. It's not fair. Distribute the money between everybody. Exactly what today in America the two parties are saying. It said it's not fair. Some people have too much. Why do you need so much? You're never going to be able to spend it. Not you, not your sons, and not your grandson, and not your great-grandsons will be able to spend it. Give it to somebody. It's not fair, God. What are you doing? Amar lo. And then God looks at King David and says, you don't trust me that I know what I'm doing? God says to King David. So God tells King David something very strange. Think about how strange it is. Im ken chesed ve'emet man yenseruhu. He says to King David, if I'll do what you said, King David, you know what's going to happen? There's not going to be kindness in the world.
Well, that's
No.
not true, because there is kindness in good deeds,
Oh.
giving support. It's not just
Very good, very good. But when it comes to money, there's not going to be kindness. And if you're going to say there's going to be...
Tzedakah is money.
And if you're going to say, so there's teachers and students, so give everybody the same IQ, same complaint. Why do you make some people smarter, some people dumber? The same complaint, the same idea. Look what God says. God says, it's a strange statement which we'll have to investigate. God says, if we're going to make everybody the same, where's the kindness in the world going to be? Who's going to be kind? If I'm going to make everybody rich or everybody poor, whichever subject you want, with kindness, with money, with abilities, with whatever. You need different people, you need rich and poor in everything, so that kindness and charity will come into this world. Klomar. Let's investigate it a little bit more, because it's going to be very difficult. David HaMelech שאל אצל הקדוש ברוך הוא. King David asked by God, מהו הצורך בעניים ועשירים? God, how come you created rich people and people? Either make everybody rich, or make everybody poor. הרי הקדוש ברוך הוא אזן את העולם כולו. It says, you give sustenance anyway, so what's the difference? Can't you give everybody equally? בחן ובחסד וברחמים, like we say, you do it with kindness, with mercy. הוא הנותן מזונות הן לעשיר והן לעני. It says, you give sustenance both to rich people and to poor people. Ella, it says, there's a difference. It says, what's the difference between the way you give? It says, God, I don't understand your way of thinking, King David asks. He says, look what's happening. Let's say if everybody is going to do the right thing. Let's assume that, right? So some people are going to get 100 billion, and they're going to be nice Jews. They're going to give 20% to charity, right? So they're going to give 20 billion to charity. Very nice, to take care of the poor. Instead of that, instead for the poor person to receive from a rich person, in between, he has an intermediary, somebody to go in between them. Why can't he receive directly from God? Give directly to the poor person. Why do you need to give the poor person a bad feeling that he's getting charity from somebody else? Give him directly. It's not nice. That's his complaint, King David's complaint to God.
It's embarrassing.
It's embarrassing, exactly. That's exactly what King David says to God. אלא שלעשיר נותן באופן ישיר. It says, to the rich man you give directly. באופן שאל תצריכנו לידי מנת בשר ודם. He never gets embarrassed. He never needs to rely on men. He never gets embarrassed. ואילו לעני, but when it comes to the poor person, נותן הקדוש ברוך הוא באמצעות העשיר. You give him through an intermediary. Somebody is controlling his life besides you, God, the rich person. והיינו שלאמיתתו של דבר מקבל גם העני מהקדוש ברוך הוא. King David says, I know that the truth is that the money that the rich man gives the poor belongs to the poor person. I realize that. Even if you know what? Many rich people also realize that. They realize that 20% of the money or 10% of the money they make doesn't belong to them. They do realize it, that it belongs to the poor person. But still, think about the poor person. What does he has to go through? Why don't just you give it to him instead of the rich person giving it to him? It's not a nice feeling. אלא שזהו על ידי שהעשיר מקבל מהקדוש ברוך הוא. You do it in such a manner that the rich person receives from God, ואחר כך מקיים מצוות הצדקה ונותן לעני. And only then he begets the mitzvah of tzedakah and gives it to the poor person. You know what King David is even asking a stronger question. King David is saying, you know what's happening, King David? Asks God. The rich person is happy to give tzedakah. If he's a religious person, if he's a righteous one, why is he happy? Because he receives heaven. He receives Gan Eden because of his behavior. It says, and the poor person gets embarrassed. It says, how is that fair? This guy feels good about himself. He receives heaven for doing a commandment. And this guy feels embarrassed that he has to receive charity. And you call that fair, God? That's nice? That's a way to act?
A disgrace.
It's a disgrace. The
poor person feels disgraced, they have to accept.
Very good. And
from the rich person.
And you're using the rich person, you're using the heaven of the rich person for what? Almost to punish the poor person. It says, this is the complaint of King David. A very strong complaint towards God.
Absolutely.
And we need to understand what's going on with it. First of all, how did God answer him? What was the answer? By the way, after God answered, King David understood the answer. I have no idea what King David, yet. We have no idea what the answer was. But it looks like King David accepted it. He said, oh, okay. But we didn't understand what's okay. So let's try to understand what's going on over here. כידוע פתקם חסידים הראשונים שמובן בכמה שיחות. And it says, we're talking about a rich person who is a righteous rich person. Not a rich person that makes you feel bad. We're talking about a righteous rich person, somebody who makes you feel good. How is he making you feel good? So it says, by the Hasidim, there used to be a saying. What was the saying of the Hasidim? It says, Pisat halechem sheli. It says, my piece of bread, shelcha kmo sheli. It is yours like it's mine. Listen to what it says. It says, my piece of bread, it should say, just like it's mine, it's yours. Hasidim don't say, just like it's mine, it's yours. It says, it's yours. First of all, it belongs to you. I know that it's yours. Just like it belongs to me. In other words, you don't have to feel bad. God gave it to me to give it to you. I'm just the banker.
That's powerful.
Yeah? But it's going to go deeper. ואדרבה, and it says furthermore, היינו שלחלק שהעשיר נותן לעני הוא מלכתחילה שלנו. It says, I know that the part that I'm giving to you never belonged to me. God gave it. It's like God gave it to me to give it to you. And you know what's happening if I'm not going to give it to you? I'm stealing it from you. It's not mine, it's yours. This is a righteous person. And about this person, the righteous person, King David is complaining. He says, even like this, it's not nice. Why does the poor person needs to feel like a poor person? and the rich person. Wait, we're going to make the question stronger.
Yeah, but in this context, it's pretty good.
It's better than before, but it's still not good, as you're going to see soon. ואף על פי כן, and nevertheless, מזה שהעשיר מקיים על ידי זה מצוות צדקה, but look what's happening, look what the result is. The rich person is doing the commandment of tzedakah, מוכח שתורת אמת אומרת, it proves that the Torah actually says, שזה אומר לכתחילה מזונו של העני. In other words, the rich man admits that this is your sustenance. Whatever money I'm giving you, God gave to me to give to you. אבל הקדוש ברוך הוא רוצה שיתחיל לעשיר. But you know what? God doesn't, still King David doesn't like it. Why doesn't King David like it? Because if it's yours, why does it have to come through me? Why does it have to come through the rich person? Let it come directly from God, just like it came to you. Why do I need to suffer? Why do you want me to suffer? Why do you want the embarrassment? ואחר כך יקיים בצדקה says, why do you have an intermediary? Give directly to the guy who deserves it. ועל זה טען דוד לקדוש ברוך הוא, and this is what King David says to God. מהו הצורך שאני אתרעם על כך? Why are you making the poor person feel so bad? It says, after all, even he's getting it from a righteous person, even nobody's embarrassing, he's embarrassed. Give him directly to him. ולאידך, and furthermore, אצל העשיר, and it says, you know what you also causing? By the rich person, יכול לבוא מזה רגל של ישות ואיך לעצמו. The rich person, you know what he feels like? He feels the best person in the world. You know, he wakes up in the morning and he says, you know who I helped? Today I helped 100 people. 100 people didn't have food. And I gave food to 100 people. So whether you like it or you don't like it, whether you think that the money belongs to you or whether you think that the money belongs to them, this is the feeling you're going to have when you just fed 100 families. You fed 100 families. Of course you're going to feel great about it. It's a great mitzvah. שהוא טוב יותר, and you know what's going to cause you? The rich person is going to feel, I am better than the poor person. You will never be able to escape that feeling. הוא פעל עניין של תיקון שיהיה חסר כחבר. And not only that, you know what the rich person is feeling like? I am almost as great as God. Just like God helps people, you know who am I? I'm a partner of God. I'm also, it says, and the poor person because of that needs to feel like...
That's obvious, because B'Tselem Elohim doesn't receive charity. He gives us.
Mm-hmm.
The rich person says, I'm B'Tselem Elohim.
That's right.
I give, and the poor...
Very good. And the poor person feels terrible.
The poor feels, and by the way, the poor still have much less.
That's right. That's exactly King David's question. It says, I don't understand what's going on here, God.
So far we're with David.
That's right. So far we're with David. That's right. כמובן מדברי הגמרא במסכת בבא בתרא. And this is what it is. We're going to see there is a debate of all of what we're talking about in the Gemara. The Gemara actually debates our problem. And we see what's going on in the debate. We're going to try to understand and solve this problem. אודות המענה של רבי עקיבא לטרנספורופוס. It says there was this debate happened between Rabbi Akiva and one of the Roman philosophers. It says they had a debate about it. What was the debate? Mashal. It says, Apostropoulos came to Rabbi Akiva and he told Rabbi Akiva, you're going to go to hell. So Rabbi Akiva asked him, why am I going to go to hell? So he says, Rabbi Akiva, you're going to go to hell because you're disrespecting God. So Rabbi Akiva says, I am disrespecting God? So Apostropoulos said, no, yes, and I can prove it to you that you're disrespecting God. And this is the analogy he gave him. Listen to the analogy. It's a great analogy. Mashal lemelech basar v'dam. It says, look, it's an analogy to a king, flesh and blood. Sheka'as al bno, that he was angry on his son. V'chavsho bebeit ha'asurin, and he put him in jail. Sha'al David HaMelech, King David asked, Ma'u hatzorech bechol ze? What is the necessity in all of this? It's not understood over here, the way it is said. So we're going to go to the original to see exactly what were they debating. So let's look inside. We're in source number 3, all the way in the bottom of page number 6. וזו שאלה שאל טרונספרופוס הרשע את רבי עקיבא. This is the question the Roman evil person asked Rabbi Akiva. He says, אם הולככם אוהב עניים הוא, he asked Rabbi Akiva, does your God love poor people? Straight question. Does your God love poor people? So Rabbi Akiva says, of course he loves them. So he says, I can prove to you he doesn't love them. If he would have loved them, why doesn't he give them money? Everything comes from God, right? If he loves them, מפני מה אינו מפרנסם? Why doesn't he give them money? אמר לו. So Rabbi Akiva says to him, and look again at the strange just answer Rabbi Akiva says. It's not going to be understood. Rabbi Akiva, you say, you know why we need poor people, Rabbi Akiva tells him? שניצול אנו בהם מדינה של גיהנום, so that we can go to heaven. Rabbi Akiva, listen to the answer. The guy asks him, why does God create poor people? And Rabbi Akiva tells him, because so that I can go to heaven. What do you mean I can go to heaven? I can give them charity. And then I did a mitzvah, and then God's going to put me in heaven. And for that, you make the poor person feel bad? Because you want to go to heaven? What kind of answer is that? It's the same problem as before. What kind of answer is this? Amar lo adraba. And then we're going to go even. So he says, even according to your logic, Rabbi Akiva, you're wrong. And I'll tell you why. Who made the person poor? God did. If God wanted to give him money, he would have given him money. Obviously, he doesn't want him to have money. And you know what you're doing by giving him money? You're going against whom? You're going against God. If God wanted to give him money, he would give him money. The proof that God doesn't like him, obviously this guy sinned against God. You know why he's poor? Because God doesn't like him. If God would have liked him, if God thinks he deserves it, God himself would have given money. The fact that God doesn't give him money, what is that a proof of? That God doesn't like him. And then you go against God? You should go to hell. You shouldn't go to heaven for what you're doing. And understand what his thing is, and look at the way Rabbi Akiva answers him. Let's continue. So Rabbi Akiva says, nice try. It was a nice try, but it doesn't work. How? Rabbi Akiva says, אמשול לך משל למה דבר דומה. Rabbi Akiva says, you have the analogy almost correct, but you don't have the analogy completely correct. למלך בשר ודם. It is a king. This is still Apostropoulos. This is still the evil guy. It says, I'm going to give you, it is a king of flesh and blood, שכעס על עבדו. He was angry on his slaves. וחבשו בבית האסורים. And he wanted, the guy did a terrible thing. So he punished him. You know what was the punishment? You're going to go to jail and you're going to get 40 lashes. And while this guy is in jail, because he raped, he killed, he did whatever, there's somebody over there in jail, you know what it is? He gives him a big screen TV, and he gives him food, and he gives it. Is the king going to be happy? He's supposed to get punished. Of course the king is not going to be happy. What are you giving him food for? What are you? He's supposed to be punished. God is punishing him. Why are you feeding him? The evil guy says, the evil Apostropoulos says. וציווה עליו שלא להאכילו, it says, do not feed him. שלא להשקותו, do not give him to drink. והלך אדם אחד והאכילו וישקעו. One of the people went, and instead of punishing this person, he gave him all the good stuff in the world. כששמע מלך לא כועס עליו. When the king found out, do you think he's not going to be angry? Of course he's going to be angry. ואתם קרויים עבדים, it says, and you are calling yourself servants of God. So it said, if you're a servant of God, God punishes him, don't give him food. God doesn't want him to be fed. Why are you giving him food? שנאמר כי לי בני ישראל עבדים. And it says, I'll prove it to you from your Torah itself. It says the Jewish people are the servants of God. In the Torah itself. And therefore, when you give a poor person money, you're going against God. Because if God wanted to give it to him, God knows his address. He can give it to him directly. He doesn't need you. So let's continue. So Rabbi Akiva is going to come and tell him, you're almost correct, you just got it wrong in one small detail. Let's see how Rabbi Akiva is going to change it. אמר לו רבי עקיבא, אמשול לך משל למה הדבר דומה? Rabbi Akiva said to him, I'm going to give you an analogy to what is this similar to? למלך בשר ודם שכעס על בנו. It says it's a king of flesh and blood, but he's not punishing his servant. You know who is he punishing? He's punishing his son. He was angry on his son. וחשבשו בבית האסורים, and he put his own son in jail because his son misbehaved. וציווה עליו שלא להאכילו ושלא להשקותו, and he commanded not to feed him and not to water him. והלך אדם אחד והאכילו והשקהו, and one man didn't listen to the king, and he fed him, and he gave him to drink. כששמע המלך, when the melech hears about it, about this man that gave him, when he wasn't supposed to give him, he says, what's the reaction of the king? לא דורון משגר לו? Is he going to be thankful to him? Obviously he's going to be thankful. It's his son. It's not just a servant. ואנו קרואים בנים. It says, this is the mistake you made. We are not just the servants of God. You know what else we are? We are also the sons of God. God treats us as sons. ואנו קרואים בנים, and we are the sons of God. דכתיב בנים אתם להשם אלוקיכם, that it says we are the sons of God. So it says, obviously, in the analogy of a son, the father cannot change the rules between a servant and his son. If the son did the crime, he has to sit the time. But when somebody goes out of his way and helps his son, deep down inside, you know what he is? He's happy about it. He's not mad about it. He's actually, especially if it was the brother of the son who helped him, he's even happier about him. That the brother didn't let his own brother go down and suffer too much. Grateful. He's going to be grateful to the person who helped his son. But we still didn't solve our problems. So let's continue. והשיב לו הקדוש ברוך הוא, God replied, אם כן, this is so, חסד ואמת, מה ננצרהו? If everybody is going to be the same, then who will do kindness in this world? Somebody has to be poor for kindness to happen. אם יהיו כולם עשירים או עניים, if the whole world are going to be rich, or the whole world is going to be poor, מי יוכל לעשות חסד? There's going to be kindness coming to this world. How are we going to do the mitzvah of charity? And we need to understand, ומדוע צריך את מצוות הצדקה? Why do we need this commandment of charity? כיוון שעלה ברצונו של הקדוש ברוך הוא. It says it looks like for whatever reason, we might not have a time to discuss it today, but for whatever reason, עלה ברצונו של הקדוש ברוך הוא, came in God's mind, שעל ידי מצוות צדקה למטה, that through us doing charity down here in this world, תהיה גם מצוות הצדקה למעלה. There's going to be the commandment of charity up there in the upper worlds. שהשמש תשפיע לירח. It says when we give charity down here, the sun gives light to the moon. וזו ישפיע למלכות. And this is what it means that the זו is giving to the kingship. וכן למעלה מעלה עד לפני הצמצום. And this causes the entire universe to turn around. It says the act of charity actually is the energy of the universe. This is what it is. It's the energy that stands behind this whole universe. It's what makes this universe stand. Okay. But we still have a problem. We still don't understand. ולאחרי כל זה, after all, נשארת רק השאלה שהובאה במאמר הידוע. There's still the question. בעניין תפילה לעני, כי יעטוף ולפני השם ישפוך שיחו. There's a Hasidic discourse regarding the verse, a prayer for a poor man when he enwraps himself and pours out his speech before God. So he says, did you ever think what when a poor person davens to God, what he actually davens? What does he ask for? You know what he asks for? This is what the poor person asks from God. He's crying when he's asking it. He's saying to God, God, I'm not against you. I understand that this is the way you created the universe. That some people have to be poor, some people have to be rich. And the reason why you created the way this universe, because this is what gives the energy to this world to come around. This is the energy that runs the world. Yeah.
One of them is the come.
Yeah, you put it in that the energy of the world will be charity. And in order for charity to occur, you need one rich person and you need one poor person. I don't have a problem with the idea. I like the idea. You know what I don't like? Let's look inside. I agree. There needs to be a rich person. There needs to be a poor person. וכיוון שבלאו הכי חסד ואמת, מה נצטרך? Because that's the way the world is run, through that energy. That's how the world is run. אבל אף על פי כן טוען העני, but nevertheless, you know what the poor person is saying? מדוע הוא צריך להיות העני ופלוני העשיר? It says, I don't understand why you picked me to be the poor person and him to be the rich person. Make it the opposite. Why am I poor and he's rich? Make it so I'm rich and he's poor. That's my complaint to you, God. That's what the poor person is saying to God. I don't mind if that's the way you want to run the world that way. But why did you make me suffer and him not? Why do I have to go through this suffering and he doesn't have to go through suffering? Why do I have to go through this embarrassment and he doesn't have to go through this embarrassment? It says the idea is nice when it's on somebody else's back. But here, God, you're putting it on my back. How is that fair? It says this is what the poor person, when he davens to God, this is what he says to God. He says, I'm not against you, God. If you already want, either make us all rich, make us all poor, but don't make me poorer than him. I don't like this feeling. Make me the rich guy and make him the poor guy. Okay. So let's try to understand what's going on over here. It's a legitimate complaint. And God has to answer it. It's a good complaint if you think about it. So in order to understand it, we're going to bring Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneers. This is from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. And this is in Grot Kodesh. Let's look at source number 4 on page number 9. מספר הרבי קודם באחד מכתביו. This is the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe saying in one of his letters. He's telling a story that he was there. He experienced this story. He experienced this occurrence happening. And he describes it in his diary. Okay? This diary was probably written before he was Rebbe. So he said like this. ביום השלישי, it says on the third day, מספר החסיד הרב זלמן זלטופובסקי. It says, one of the Hasidim, Rav Zalman, says a story. It was Vav Tishrei, it was the 6th day of Tishrei. באו הרבה מגבירי העיר ונכבדי קישינוב להוד כבוד קודשת אדמו"ר מהר"ש. There came a lot of these Hasidim to the Rebbe Maharash, לבקש, to ask for things, with request. They had a request. כי להיות העיר גדולה כנרבו, because they were in a big city, והרבה זקנים וחלושים, there were many old people and many sick people, שלא יכלו לבוא בראש השנה לשמוע את התורה אשר אמר רבי. This is 6 days after Rosh Hashanah, and all the old people and the sick people weren't able to come for Rosh Hashanah to the Rebbe to hear the Torah of the Rebbe. So it says they still want to hear Hasidus, they still want to hear something from the Rebbe. על כן מבקשים ממה שיועיל הרבי להגיד תורה ביום ההוא. They are asking that the Rebbe is going to say Torah in that day. ובשעה אשר יאות לפניו. And it says, and they don't mind, whichever time is good for you, they're going to come. והרבי נאות להם, ויגביל למועד לשעה הרביעית. And he says, I can give you a speech, I'm going to give you a drush on the 4th hour. Page 10. חדר גדול ורחב ידיים היה בחצר ההוא. There was a big room over there, אשר דר שם הרבי, that the Rebbe lived. אבל בשעה אחת כבר נתמלא כולו. After 1 hour, this whole room was filled. ובהיות האוויר טוב, הנה על פי רישיון הרבי, הוציאו את הבימה לחצר. It says that since it was a good weather, they took the bima, they took everything outside, they took the stage outside. ובשעה הקבועה יצא הרבי מהיכלו. So that the rabbi came out from his room, יעלה על הבימה, he went up on stage, ישב על הכיסא אשר הוכן עבורו, and he sat on the chair that was prepared. החצר היה מלא מפה לפה, the yard was full, והדרת קודש בשקיטה חרישית חפפה על כל העומדים בחצר ועל גגי בנייני החצר והאילנות הגבוהים אשר בחצר ההוא. And it was an atmosphere of holiness throughout. הרבי הועיל להגיד המאמר, the rabbi said the discourse, תפילה לעני כי יעטוף. This is what the Rebbe says. This is the davening of the poor person. How he complains to God. ולפני השם משפוך שיחו. It says before God he is saying his davening. ונועם כל קדושתו נשמע למרחוק. And when the Rebbe said it, his voice was heard from afar. וכל העם רואים את פני הקודש, הקודשים, ושומעים כל הגה יוצא מקדושת לב הרבי בהתעוררות העבודה. And everybody was moved by the words of the Rebbe. נושא תוכן המאמר, תפילה להניחו לו. So it says, what was the Rebbe talking about? נודעו בביאור עניין משפיע ומקבל. The discourse is about that there has to be a receiver and there has to be a giver. It says, you know what runs the world? The giver and a receiver. In all relationship, man and woman, there's a giver, there's a receiver. Student and rabbi, there's a giver, there's a receiver. Moon and sun, there's a giver and there is a receiver. In all aspects, the energy behind the world is the giver and the receiver. And he says, it's not only down here, it's also up there in heaven. והבחנו אשר משום זה צריך להיות למטה גם ציור בציור אדם עני ועשיר. He says, that's why down here on earth, there needs to be a rich person, a giver, and a poor person, a receiver. להיות עניין משפיע ומקבל. To be a matter of a receiver and a giver. העני הוא מקבל, the poor person is the receiver, והעשיר הוא המשפיע, and the rich person is the giver. אבל הרים עוד הרבי את הדרת קדושת כולו ואמר, but the rabbi picked up his voice, and he said, כמדבר בכל טענה, and he had the same voice, the same complaint that we've been raising. אמת הדבר שבכללות העולמות ובעולמות בריאה יצירה בעשייה הפרטיים צריך להיות עניין של משפיע מקבל. It says, I understand it. That in the higher worlds all the energy comes from a receiver and a giver. ולכן צריך גם למטה, and that's why you need it down here also, a receiver and a giver, the rich and the poor. בציור קומה של נשמות ישראל, להיות העניין של משפיע ומקבל, there needs to be these two aspects. אבל העני טוען, it says the poor person still is screaming to God. מדוע צריך הוא להיות המקבל? It says, I want to give. I don't want to be the one who's the receiver. You know who I want to be? I want to be the giver, not the receiver. Why, God, did you make me the receiver and not the giver? וטענת העני היא טענת צודקת. And then this is what the Rebbe says. And you know what? The poor person is right. No matter what you're going to say to him, no matter what you're going to give to him, Kabbalah, the way, energies of the world, he still has a complaint. The complaint is, God, you could have made me a rich person. Why did you choose to make me a poor person? It says, בשמי דבר קודש הילולו מפי הרבי, הנה גאה העם בבכייה. It says, the people were so moved from when the Rebbe said it, that the entire congregation started crying. הלוואי אמר החסיד הרב זלמן זלפטובסקי, the Chassid Rav Zalman said, הייתי זוכה לבכות בתמימות כזו ביומי האחרון. It says, I wish I would have cried in that manner in my last day. It says, everybody was so moved by these words of the Rebbe. אמר לי אבי הרבי רש"ב, so the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe says, at that moment my father told me, פתגמו של הסבא, it says, this is what your grandfather said, the Rebbe Maharash, אבל טענת העני, מדוע הוא צריך להיות עני? When the poor person is complaining, why did you, God, choose me to be the poor person? ואישור הסבא שטענת אני טענה צודקת, and the fact that the Rebbe Maharash says that the poor person is right, צריכים לעמוד תמיד מול העיניים. It says that has to be always in front of one's eyes. וצריך לתת כוח ועוז לעשות ולחזור ולעשות, אך טוב לכל מי שאפשר. You always have to remember. So we tell ourselves all the time, he's a poor person. This is the way God makes the world. What can I do? He says, you know what this poor person is experiencing every second of his life when he's a poor person? You know what he's screaming to God? God, it's not fair that I am poor and that he is rich. That's what he's saying. He says, and if you realize that the poor person is right, the reason why you're rich and he's poor, you know why we are rich? I'll tell you why we are rich. The only reason why we over here are rich is because we were born, or at least some of us weren't born, some of us came from another place, but we are living in America, in the United States of America. And the poorest person in the United States in America is going to be high. Put him in the Congo. Compare him to a place who grew up in the Congo right now. He's rich. There's no reason why we are rich. It was a lottery. It was a lottery. We were born into this richness. It's not because we are smart. It's not because we are... I promise you, there are people in Congo who are smarter than you. There are people in Congo who are better than us. There are people in Congo who are not lazy like us. And they're not as successful as us. You know what they're complaining to God? God, why did you choose me? Why did you make me born over here in Congo? If I would have been born in America, you know where I would have been right now? Just because you chose where I was born, my whole life had to change. And just because I was born, in 2005, imagine people you were born in 1200s. 90% of the population didn't make it to the age of 20. They would die. I don't know what happened to them. It says, just because of the time, this is what's happening. That should be always before your eyes. But let's continue. ובכן, we are on page 12, על זה ישנו ציווי שלא להרהר אחר מידותיו של הקדוש ברוך הוא. On this, we have to remember that God, this is King David's question to God. Now we really understand his question. And God comes to King David and says, I know what I'm doing. That was the answer. I know what I'm doing. So what do you mean you know what you're doing? What kind of answer is that? The poor person still has a complaint, even though you know what you're doing. So the poor persons, we're going to try to find an answer for the poor person over here. So let's look. יכול להיות, on page 12, גם מעמד ומצב שאינו מרגיש שחסר לו משהו. It says it is possible that the poor person is in such a lofty level that he doesn't even know that he is lacking anything. What does it mean? ואשרי חלקו שהוא שמח בחלקו, and he's happy in his lot. ולא חסר לו מאומה. And he doesn't miss anything. And he says, what are you talking about? It says, כידוע מהסיפור מהמגיד ממזריץ'. There's a famous story from the מגיד ממזריץ'. שהיה מישהו שהתעונן בנוגע לדאגות הפרנסה והפך העשירות וכו'. There was somebody who was complaining that he's poor. He doesn't have any money, he's suffering. וכדי להרגיעו מטענותיו, שלחו המגיד לרבי זושה מהניאופולי ללמוד ממנו. And the מגיד ממזריץ' sent him to one of the Hasidim, Rabbi Zusha, and he told, go see how Rabbi Zusha lives. ובראותו שבביתו של רבי זושה אין מאומה, he went to the house of Rabbi Zusha, and he saw that, you know what, I thought I was poor. This guy had nothing. He had no food in his house. Nothing. כידוע גודל העניות והדחקות שהייתה אצלו. He says he didn't even have a chair. Nothing. He had no furniture in the house. חשב, so he says, so he was thinking, why did the Maggid send me here? So he was thinking, maybe the Maggid sent me here to teach me not to complain. That compared to this guy, I am considered to be what? Rich. says, that's in the beginning what he thought. We're going to see that wasn't the reason. חשב תחילה שהמגיד שלחו כדי שיראו שישנו מישהו עני יותר ממנו. In the beginning he thought that the Magidim is rich, wanted to show him that there's somebody who's even poorer than him. ובמילא יקל על ליבו, and that's going to comfort him. אף שזוהי נחמה פורתא. Says, but what kind of comfort is it? After that he started to think, this is a comfort, not only I am suffering, now I should know that there's guys who are suffering even more than me. What kind of answer is this? Says, you go to somebody, you tell him I'm suffering. You say, so the Rebbe says, you're suffering, but you still have both legs. Thank you very much. Now I should feel better about myself. And I see another Jew that's suffering even more than me with that he doesn't have any legs. What kind of answer is this? שיש יהודי אחד שנמצא במצב גרוע יותר ממנו. What are you answering him? That there's another Jew that is in a worse situation than this one? אך כיוון שהמגיד שלחו לרבי זושה, but he says, no. That can't be the reason that the Rebbe sent me over here. The Rebbe probably sent me here for a different reason. רצה לשמוע ממנו דבר מה. So he says, no, it's impossible that this is what the Rebbe sent me here. So you know what he did? סיפר לו את כל הסיפור. This Chassid told Rab Zusha exactly what happened. He says, look, I'm a poor person, I don't have any money. I was concerned, I'm suffering. I came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe sent me to you. Says, why do you think the Rebbe sent me to you? Can you teach me something? So listen to what Rab Zusha told him. ענה לו רב זושה. רב זושה answered him. שאינו מבין כלל את כל העניין שהמגיד שלח ללמוד ממנו. It says, I don't understand why the Magid sent you here. I have no idea why the Magid sent you to me. שאין לעני להתאונן על חסרונו. It says, he wants you to learn from me that the poor person shouldn't complain that he doesn't have any money. It says, כיוון שלא חסר לו מאומה. It says, I'm not a poor person. I've got everything I need. I have no idea why he sent you here. I'm not a poor person. I don't know. I have no idea why he sent me to me. He says, I have no idea. ואז הבין מה הייתה כוונת המגיד. Only then he understood what the Magid meant. So it looks like there's a level. If a person is suffering, if a poor person is suffering, the first stage he should know is that if he would be on a high level, he would think what is important in life, he wouldn't be suffering. He would be more spiritual. He wouldn't have any lacking. But between me and you, this is a level that belongs to Rab Zusha. It's not a level that you can send a normal person would ever reach. So it's a nice story, but the story doesn't apply to a normal human being like us. What are we going to do? We're never going to get to the level of Rab Zusha. It says, it's a very nice story. But רק אם אינו מרגיש שחסר לו משהו. But to Rab Zusha it works, because he really doesn't feel like he's a poor person. He doesn't have any lack. אבל אם הוא מרגיש שחסר לו, but if he is lacking, he doesn't have any food. He doesn't have any warmth in his house. He doesn't have any clothing. He doesn't have a roof over his head. What should he do? He has a lacking. Rab Zusha didn't have a lacking. He didn't notice that the roof is leaking. He didn't notice it's cold in the house. He didn't notice his sons didn't eat for a week. He didn't notice. But a person that does notice, what should he do? אזי יש מצווה מן התורה לבקש צרכיו מהקדוש ברוך הוא. Then there's a commandment from God to ask your needs from God. It says, God says, ask for your needs. This is what prayer is. Prayer is what? Ask for your needs. כמו שכתוב הרמב"ם בתחילת הלכות תפילה, just like the Rambam says in the beginning of the laws of davening, מצוות עשה, it says it's a positive commandment. שיהיה אדם שואל צרכיו, that whenever you're lacking, ask from God. שהוא צריך להם בקשה וכנה, it says, whatever you're lacking, you're required to do, to ask from God. אך לכאורה, but he says, still this is problematic. You know why it's problematic? It says, the Rambam tells you to ask from God, from whatever is lacking, and then you open up the Zohar, and the Zohar tells you, you're not allowed to. אך לכאורה צריך להבין, but one needs to understand, מובא בזוהר, it is brought down in the זוהר, שהמתפלל לקדוש ברוך הוא על מזונו דומה לכלב שצועק הב. It says a person who asks for his food from God, you know what is he like? He's like a dog. It says the sound a dog makes in Hebrew is hav. That's the sound a dog makes when you say it in Hebrew. What does hav means? Give. It says that's what a dog says. What are you, a dog? All you care about giving? Give me. So it says the Zohar is telling you. Yeah, it says the Zohar is telling you you're like a dog when you ask for your needs. The Rambam says you have to ask for your needs. He says, what's going on over here? Am I supposed to ask for my needs, or am I like a dog when I'm asking for my need? ולכאורה, הרי זה להפך מדברי הרמב"ם, it's against the Rambam. שלא זו בלבד שצריך להתפעל לקדוש בכל מזונו. The Rambam says you need to daven to God. אלא עוד זאת, זו מצוות הסמל, it says it's a commandment. If you're not davening to God, you're going against God. ואילו בזוהר נאמר שהוא למטה מציור אנושי, and the Zohar calls you a dog. When you do the same thing, it says, what's going on over here? So it says, אומנם יש לו עצה לא להיות כמו כלב שצועק הב. It says there is a way out. A person doesn't have to be like a dog that screams, give. כאשר הנהיגתו היא באופן שמעשיך יהיו לשם שמיים. When you ask for God, not for what you need, you ask from God truly for what He needs. Let's understand what I'm saying. For example, it says, God, do you know why I need money? I need money because I need to raise my kids in a Torah way. I need to send them to yeshiva. And yeshiva costs, you know how much? God today? It costs $20,000 a year. And I don't have money. So I do need money, God. But I don't want the money to go to the casino. I don't want the money to go on vacation. I don't want the money. I want the money to use it for what? To use it for good. To use it for you, God. To use it for the need of the society. לקיים מצוות בהידור. I want to do your commandments in a nicer manner. או כדי לתת צדקה לעניים למוסדות. I want to open a hospital. I want to open a school. והדרך כל העניינים שעל ידם נעשה יגיע כפיך באופן שלך בטוב לך. In other words, I'm going to use all the money for your needs, God. שעל ידי זה בונה גם את העולם הבא שלו. Through this you build not only your world, you build God's world. וכידוע סיפור החסידים אודות אחד האופנים של לימוד זכות, שהיה בעל שם טוב מלמד באופן ההנהגה בקרת שמס בתי מרזח. At the time of the Baal Shem Tov, there used to be a problem. A lot of Jews used to have bars. That's how they used to make a living. And a lot of the bars, the barkeeper, as a bar owner, used to do a lot of, cut corners to earn more money. And there was a decree up in heaven that because all those Jews that were bar owners and were cutting corners and were taking money away from the non-Jewish people, there was a decree up in heaven that the Jewish people should be punished. Because the Baal Shem Tov heard about the decree and he needed to take the decree away. And the decree was true. So how is he going to take this decree away? So let's look inside. שלא הייתה בתכלית הזהירות מעניינים של אבק השגת גבול וכו'. They weren't very careful for not cutting corners. And the Baal Shem Tov says, you know, God, why they're cutting corners? הסיבה לכך, it says, the reason why they're cutting corners is not because they want to take the money and go on the French Riviera on a cruise. That's not why they're cutting corners. You know why they're cutting corners, God? שפלוני צריך כסף היא לא בשביל עצמו, he doesn't need it for himself. אלא כדי שיוכל להשיג חתן תלמיד חכם עבור ביתו. It says, the reason why they're cutting corners is because the only way to marry their daughter off to somebody who's a Torah scholar is in order, if you can afford to feed him for 10 years or 15 years in Kollel. Give him money so he can sit down and learn. Otherwise, no religious person, person who likes Torah is ever going to marry your daughter. It says, even that God, the reason why they're cutting corners is not because it's not that they're doing the right thing, obviously. They're doing the wrong thing. But they're not doing the wrong things because they want to go on the French Riviera on the casino. They're doing the wrong things, you know why? Because they want to live a spiritual life. That's why they're doing the wrong thing. They're wrong. But they're wrong in a way that you can understand why they're wrong. כשמדובות אודות בת ישראל שגרה בקרצ'מה שלה, when you're talking about a Jewish lady that grew up in a bar, שאינה בעלת מעלות מיוחדות, she doesn't have great attributes obviously. הנה העצה היחידה לעשייה לתלמיד חכם, the only way these people can see how she can ever marry somebody who's a sage, who's a righteous person, היא על ידי זה שיבטיח לחתן שיכול לדור בקרצ'מה וללמוד תורה ללא דאגות פרנסה. So even that is in such a manner. I want to just end with a story. There once was a person who was very, very rich, who came to Baal Shem Tov, And he came to the Baal Shem Tov, and he said to the Baal Shem Tov, I don't know what happened, around 5 months ago, I started to lose all my money. He says, I was always careful with my money. I always gave a lot of charity, more than what was necessary. I always fed the poor people. Every Shabbos, you would have 20, 30 poor people in my table. It says, and about 3-4 months ago, business started to go bad, really bad. And I'm about to lose all my money. I don't know what to do. So the Baal Shem Tov told him, it is because of tabak, of snuff. In the old time, they used to have a snuff box. They used to take snuff. Yom Kippur, some people say it. You see them on Shabbos, they used to have snuff. It's like a common thing in some communities. So it says it's because of snuff. He says to Sebastian, what do you mean because of snuff? He says, think back of what happened because of snuff. So he thought back, he says, yeah, you're right. Exactly 3 months ago. It says, I was sitting on my table, and I had boxes of snuff all around the table for all the guests, and I had my own personal snuff box. And I took, on the Shabbos meal, I took a little bit of snuff from my personal snuff box. And there was a poor person who was sitting next to me, right, in my Shabbos meal. And he took out his hand to take some snuff from my snuff box. He took out his hand to go like this. And I closed the snuff box, my snuff box, and I showed him that he has one right next to him. He doesn't need to take from my personal one. And he says, from that day on, this is what happened. I started to go down. So the Baal Shem Tov said to him, the poor person asked God a question. He asked, why God did you choose me to be the poor person and him to be the rich person? So that's the question that the poor person has been asking for a long, long, long time. And until a certain point, there was a good reason I could always answer him. It says, because the rich person is doing the test that he's supposed to do. He gives more than 20% to charity. He takes care of the poor. He makes sure that every poor person does the right thing. He gives him loans, he gives him things. He says, that poor person that was sitting next to you was about to ask you for a loan. And you would have given it to him. But because you closed the lid, he was too embarrassed to ask you. And because you didn't help him, and he's crying to God, why I have to be the poor person, God couldn't answer the angel why he has to be the poor person. So the angels in heaven decided, we're going to take all your money and we're going to give him to him. So all the money you're going to lose, and all that money he's going to become rich. 3 months later, that poor person started to open a business, and he became very, very wealthy. In other words, all the money transferred over from the rich man to the poor man. Continue the story. The Baal Shem Tov asked, the person asked the Baal Shem Tov, is there any way for me to get out of this situation? He says, yes. Go to the poor man, go to the rich man now, and ask from him for a snuff. And if he's not going to give it to you, or he's going to treat you the same way you treated him, that's what's going, God is going to reverse it again and give it back to you. So he says, I'm not just going to ask him on a regular day. So it's not what you do. You ask on a regular day because he's going to give it to me. He's going to treat me nicely. So he says, I'm going to wait until it's going to be the hardest day. He says, what is going to happen? He waited until that rich person married off his daughter. And at the time, in the wedding, that he was really dancing, with all his guests, he was dancing. He went like this to him on his coat. He says, give me some snuff. So he says, that rich man, the previous poor man, says, okay. He walked with him, took the snuff box on thing, and says, here, take some, with a smile on his face. The rich man started crying. The poor man started crying because he knew that he's not going to have the money. So the rich man now asked him, why are you crying? It's a wedding, it's a happy occasion. So he told him the whole story. And listen what happened. The poor man, who's now a rich man, told him, I know that all my money is your money. Therefore, I'm going to make you a partner, half and half, in my business. And he gave him half his business to become a partner with him.